Well, welcome everyone to the PD panel with Parkinson's Point. Today we have a couple advisors, Michelle and Judith and Ken. Thanks, Ken, for joining us. That'll be chatting with us today and sharing their experience about living with Parkinson's. And this is meant to be an open discussion. We do have a few questions that we can use as a conversation starter, so to speak, and discussion starter. But we'll keep it fairly informal. And Judy, since you're joining us today, and as we wait for some other folks to come on, did you have any questions today that you were really hoping to ask the group or the panel? We could get started with those actually if you did, but if not, don't worry.
Not really. Excuse me. I didn't really know what this was going to be all about. So, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. So I really didn't have any specific questions. I just am eager to hear other people's experiences, and my life is changing constantly. So it's hard to tell.
Hi, Judy. I'm Judith.
And why don't we start with like introductions?
Sure.
So Judith, do you want to maybe introduce yourself and just share a little bit about who you are, and
okay,
and you can add a little bit about your experience with Parkinson's there, if you would like.
Okay, I'm Judith Wilson, and I was diagnosed in July of 2011. So I'm working on 11 years, but that's the years since the official diagnosis. I had hunches many, many years before of what was going on, but I finally got it confirmed in July of 2011. We together, Ken and I, have been active in a lot of Parkinson activities around the community. In particular, right now, my focus, actually, not just right now, since the very beginning of my diagnosis, I have been focused on exercise as my primary treatment and many other adjunctive things that help with that. This type of activity that we're doing with Meredith today is extremely important for us to be doing outreach, but also for those of you who are new to this community to begin to get a sense of who your community is for Parkinson's here in the Denver area. So we welcome you. We're glad you're here, and we hope you have lots of questions today.
Thank you so much, Judith. I appreciate that. Ken, do you want to take a moment to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Ken Wilson, and we got hints that there was something wrong in 1996 when we were living in New Hampshire, and Judith was running because we were runners at that time, and her left footfall was a slap instead of a heel toe thing. And didn't think anything about it, and eventually things progressed to a diagnosis. So it even goes back another 10 years as far as losing smell. I'm trying to remember what the initial reaction was to Judith's diagnosis. I don't think I was frozen by that. I believe I was still hearing things and remembering them. And we went online and did research and located resources and obeyed Judith's prescribing physicians' written out prescription that said exercise. So we were lucky to be invited by Meredith in the startup process for Parkinson's Point, and have had some fidelity with this organization since its inception. So we cherish it and all the things it's providing, and are rooting for its further manifestation.
Thank you so much, Ken, for introducing yourself. So Ken is Judith's partner. I don't know if would you call yourself a care partner? Is that an okay word?
Support maybe?
Support partner? Awesome. And so you're bringing that perspective today to the table, which is really helpful. Michelle, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Michelle Gutierrez, and I was diagnosed with Parkinson's in January of 2016. Not a big shock, but had a lot of previous misdiagnoses, which I think you'll find as you grow in the community, that's pretty common.
Mhm.
Main challenge is fatigue and tremor. I was very blessed in my journey. The day after my diagnosis, I started looking for support groups, and I found Meredith. I found Judith and Ken, John and Martha Carlin, and Katie Strittmatter, all in the same support group on the same day, 1 week after my diagnosis. So, that blessing started my journey and gave me a lot of wonderful resources to help me build my tool belt.
Thanks, Michelle. I appreciate you introducing yourself. And then we have Joe as well joining us. Joe, we're just kind of taking a minute to introduce ourselves, and as you heard Michelle doing a little bit about who we are and Parkinson's and how it's impacted our life.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Joe Miller. I'm 59 years old. I was diagnosed 10 years ago. I was diagnosed very quickly because I had a tremor and I'm a little dominant on the left side, so that helped. And the doctor said I could, within 97%, you have Parkinson's. I'm 97% sure. That was high enough for me. So I began to, my response wasn't necessarily why me. My response was why not me. So that's I started to. Somebody said something recently to me that made a lot of sense. Is you have to be your own advocate. You have to advocate for yourself, because if you don't, nobody else will. And that's not to say that your loved ones and your care partner aren't going to participate in that. But this is really, I mean, if you want to make things happen, you got to make them happen. And by that, I mean, you're getting in trials, different tests, and do different things to, to help your odds, feeling good and being productive.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Joe, for sharing that. So that our introductions kind of lead us into our first question for the group, and that is just to have you share a little bit with us about what helped you move from the shock and all of the emotions that you experienced in receiving your diagnosis to a place where you had, and maybe acceptance isn't the right word, but we're ready to take some action and maybe do things that had been recommended to you from the doctor, like exercise or taking some specific medications, or maybe joining a support group or something like that. Judith, why don't we start in the same order and just have you share first?
Okay, be happy to do that. Thank you. First of all, I was, excuse me. Some people would say I cheated just a bit. I have a medical background, and I had a very good idea of what was going on several years in advance, many years in advance. Doctors being their own worst enemies when it comes to health issues, I put it off and ignored it for as long as I could, until finally a couple of people close to me really called me on it. Literally one day and 2 weeks later, separate from one another, but nailed me and said, there's something going on. You need to go ahead and find out what it is. Well, I realized at that point in time that I had spent not enough time paying attention to my own situation. So went to the neurologist, to the movement disorder specialist, came away with the diagnosis. And as Ken mentioned a couple of minutes ago, literally my first prescription from my movement disorder specialist was for exercise. And he actually wrote down what he wanted me to do on the paper. And I do far more and far different things today than that paper showed. But what that little piece of paper on a prescription pad did was it gave me insight into the reality of what I was dealing with, because it told me this was what I needed to change. This was what I needed to look at as my new life, if you will. So acceptance, that I agree with you, Meredith, that can sometimes be a loaded word. But in some sense, each of us does have to accept where we are, because we're not going to be able to undo the diagnosis. And so you can fight it, you can accept it, you can do something in between, you can get organized around it, or you can ignore it and let it just happen. There are many ways to approach it. For me, the acceptance part of it was really important, because it gave me insight early on into resources. When you talk about exercise for Parkinson, what do you really mean by that? And where are you headed with that sort of thing? So I've discovered early community resources, and that was very, very helpful. I also was so fortunate to be in a group of people that Diane Cook worked with in her initial development of her program for Parkinson. That was a huge plus, because it gave me immediate community. There were probably 15 to 18 people in our first group. It gave me immediate community at the diagnosis level and a follow-on into support group. So that was all really positive early in the diagnosis, and gave me a very good feeling about if I had to have this thing, how was I going to deal with it? Those were real pluses for me.
Thank you, Judith. Ken, I know you spoke a little bit about this already, but do you want to share any more from the support partners' perspective of that transition?
Oh, yeah. Upon the diagnosis, we fled to the internet, of course, and searched for resources. And we encountered the existence of PAR, Davis Phinney Foundation, American Parkinson's Disease Association, Parkinson's Foundation. Parkinson's Point did not exist at that time, so those were our go-to things. And as Judith indicated, we were very lucky to get to participate in Diane Cook's SELF program, which gave us pretty much an instant community. And that SELF program ended up resulting in the establishment of the SELF PD support group that meets at Bethany Lutheran on the second Wednesday of the month at 11. I searched for information on the disease progression and lifespan impact, and discovered that for normal PD, not aggressive or MSA or others, lifespan was not seriously shortened, meaning that this was going to be our life for a while. And therefore, the immediate conclusion is we need to be able to adapt to that life and make a livable situation out of it. As Judith indicated, Dr. Kumar prescribed exercise before he even wrote a prescription for any medicines. We found pedaling for Parkinson's, Parkinson's Association of Rockies classes and yoga and dance. And when Parkinson's Point came online, we found boxing, Tai Chi, and body conditioning. What's it called? What is Lisa? Strength and balance. Yeah. And getting into the pedaling for Parkinson's stuff, we encountered John Carlin, and we ended up getting persuaded to ride the RAGBRAI right across Iowa in 2014, the first year, 2015, the first year. So we got a tandem and did inadequate training and went out and did that with a wonderful group of people, a wonderful team, and did that for the next 5 years. I credit all of this investment in exercise and conditioning with keeping us really functional. We are still cleaving to that idea and will be continuing to participate for the foreseeable future. I don't see anything other than a catastrophic medical event that's going to change that approach. That's all I got.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. Appreciate you sharing that. Michelle, do you want to share a little bit about your experience of what helped you move from that shock and sort of the emotions that you experienced when you receive your diagnosis to a place where you were ready to maybe move forward or take action on things?
Sure. And mine blends, and you'll find that, this is actually a community. We are a community, Parkinson's. Not that we choose it, but what helped me move was, as I had indicated in my introduction, is finding that support group and finding it fast. And as a matter of fact, I could walk to my support group. That's how blessed I was. And the first person that approached me was Judith. And she grabbed me by the hand, and I've told you this story, Meredith, so you can roll your eyes. But, she took my hand and she put a little piece of paper in it, and it said self. And then the rest is history. So, finding that support group, Judith taking the time to hold my hand, to tell me about self, to get me into self, Diane Cook, Big and Loud, the whole, not Big and Loud, self program. Meredith was my teacher there. I could just name after name after name, but that support group helped. And seeing in that support group, seeing people that were much farther along in their struggle and doing just fine, and had found a way to pivot, if I use kind of a trite word, or find a word to accept, or whatever word you want to use. So the support group and the community really helped.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think you hit on a really good point that I've heard as a theme many times, but is sort of woven into everyone's stories. And that's that you, fortunately, in some way or another, were able to meet someone living with Parkinson's who kind of connected with you, shared with you, and almost kind of took you by the hand to help you start down the path of what you might need in your life when you're diagnosed. And just that one-on-one, person-to-person interaction and caring is just what kind of points us in the right direction, maybe is a way to say it. But thanks, Michelle. Joe, do you want to share with us?
Certainly. For me, I was lucky too, like Michelle and like Judith and Ken. I did find some people, in the general population, when you're a 50-year-old guy, making new friends is tough enough as it is. But being a 50-year-old guy with Parkinson's, but I'll tell you what, I probably have way more friends than I anticipated by being in the community, because it's just, I just found the people to be very humbled by what we was sort of laid on us. And I had a similar response to some, which is, why not me? Because I've been healthy all my life. So, and then I also knew that as they were trying to diagnose me, that I knew that there were diseases much, much worse than Parkinson's. By that, I mean things happen quickly. And Parkinson's doesn't, in my case, in many cases, can move very slowly, and that can be a blessing to some at some point. The person that really made a big difference for me was John Carlin. You probably hear his name so often it gets imprinted in your mind, but he was huge for me because he was about my age. He looked a little bit like me. He's much better looking, but he was just the nicest guy and just genuine, just a sweet, sweet guy. And he'd do anything for you. And he would go to end of the earth to somebody who's newly diagnosed in particular, because he knew how vulnerable they were. And so, I'm in kind of John Carlin withdrawal because his family is, they moved to Kentucky where they have a lot of family there to support them. So, I get my weekly, we get our fix on the phone and get him up to speed on things like this, what's going on, who's doing what. And there are no secrets. It's a very tight-knit community. But I think it's important that, first thing I said was you got to advocate for yourself. And that doesn't change, but you're going to have a lot of help along the way. You're going to have the doctors and their PAs, and you're going to have your friends who you meet. And, when you go to see a neurologist, let's say twice a year, don't go by yourself. Because you might bring a list, but you're going to miss something on it. Or you just don't know I'm lucky my wife's the nurse. So when we try to schedule things, when those big meetings when she's available, but your wife doesn't have to be a nurse, just somebody who can write and listen, because there's a lot of information that comes your way, and you're going to have questions too. So do that. The only one thing I want to add also is you're going to hear a lot about trials. Trials being trials for different drugs, for different treatments, all related to Parkinson's in some way, shape, or form. And you may wonder, well, how am I going to do that? And how am I going to look out for my own health? There are ways to do it. They structure these. They're not going to accept you into a study if they think you're going to fail with your own health. So you'll have input that way. It is important though, because I've heard it said, and I think it's correct, that there's going to be a cure for Parkinson's someday, hopefully sooner than later. And when they find it, it's going to happen in one of those trials. So if they don't have people like yourselves to participate, it slows everything down. I've seen it firsthand. So I didn't do it immediately because I thought it was, well, maybe I should just get used to, what it's like to have Parkinson's first. But then soon enough, I got involved, and I've been in 2, 3, 4, and they've all been beneficial in some way. And I recommend, really, if you want progress to take place, that's the way it's going to take place.
Thanks, Joe. I really appreciate you sharing that. Let's pause for a minute and just give the group a chance to ask any questions. Does anyone have any questions after we've shared all of that so far? Okay, and feel free if you do have questions, you're more than welcome to let us know. So why don't we move on to our next question, which really piggybacks on the first. How do you guys approach problems, barriers that come up, concerns, when you do set out to do something to help how you're feeling, how you're living on a day-to-day basis, how you're managing your disease, and that darn Parkinson's gets in the way, so to speak, or just something comes up. And I know at every phase too, there's maybe different challenges around it, right? Judith, why don't we have you start again, okay? Hey, Judith, you're just muted, hun. There we go.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks, Meredith. I would like to take just a minute and make a couple reflections quickly on what people said about the last question. One is the idea of having someone with you when you go to an appointment. You need to have your own personal secretary with you every time you go to any type of appointment that has your Parkinson. Okay, very important, because you will not pick up everything, and you want everything that you can get out of those meetings. And the other comment I have is about research, as Joe was commenting how important that is. It's our chance to pay it forward. And we know that as we're doing research activities, there are people yet to be diagnosed who will benefit from that work that's being done. It's extremely important that each of us contribute in our own ways. There are 4 major research centers in the Denver area. I won't go into them now, but they're easily identified, and folks can talk to you about those, get you in contact with people to become involved there. So to the question, how to approach problems or barriers. The first thing that I try to do is determine, is it really a problem or a barrier, or is it just that I have to change the way I'm used to doing something? So a lot of that is in my head. If in fact it is truly a barrier, then I need to decide, okay, is this a barrier I need to go over, under, around, or through? And which way is going to lead to the best outcome, so that I'm looking at considering alternatives to what I've been doing in the past and finding new ways to do the same thing, or saying, you know, what I did before was just fine, I will stick with it, or it's all gone because none of it works any longer, and I've got to start that piece of whatever it is from the beginning, from the get-go. And so I'm considering alternatives. I have to be creative in the resources that I find and that I use, meaning books, printed matter, but mostly people. The instant communities that you've heard people talk about this morning, those are people who understand one another without having to reinvent the wheel every time they have a conversation. So being creative, developing workarounds. What's another way to get to that other side of the moat than just walking across a bridge, because the bridge is broken right now. The biggest issue for me is making sure, as I investigate all of these alternatives, I have determined that there is actually a barrier, but I've gotten my ego out of the way. And I talk to people who can help me. I read materials. I don't assume that all of the answers are right here to start with. I have many resources and I need to use them. Thank you.
I'm not sure, Judith, if you're ready to hand it off to Ken, we can do that.
No.
Tag, you're it, Ken.
How do you approach problems, barriers, when PD gets in the way? What I am in a place where I've accepted the tenets of the serenity prayer, to accept the things I cannot change. So we, as a couple, have always had a difficulty about, for example, being on time. And that has become even more difficult with the presence of Parkinson's, because it takes a time to get assembled. So again, that's a thing I cannot change. And as a result, I am giving myself grace and accepting that as a fact of life, as a thing I cannot change. I can change the things I can by making sure that I'm ready to go, and I can assist Judith in anything that she needs to prepare herself to go. So those are the approaches I take. So far with exercise, the impact of PD is pretty insignificant and almost indistinguishable at our age from the aging process and progression. We both have difficulty with word location and with name retrieval and things like that. I'm not getting firmly fixed in my mind when we get in the car, the exact route we're taking. And for example, I have taken some quite lengthy detours when I miss my turn to get to where we're supposed to be going. And Judith has been very helpful with that. And we're becoming more of a team, particularly in this driving thing and keeping safe. She is seeing things and letting me know, and she's even telling me when my blinker has been on for the last 7 miles. So that's all I got.
Thanks, Ken. I appreciate too that you have a good sense of humor about it, right? We kind of just have to roll with what comes up and take it day by day, right? Michelle, why don't you share a little bit with us about how you approach problems or barriers that arise and when you set out to do something in maybe PD or just maybe old age, quote unquote, kind of gets in the way?
I sure will. Ken picked up on a lot of my thoughts and my habits. And I always use the cover phrase. You know, my husband will say, well, now how did the drive to physical therapy go? I'll say, well, I took the scenic route, but I got there. Right. And that's, I think, both what Judith and Ken were saying is you do need to be open-minded and you need to find your new way. And that, what I relate to is I have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, so that when that does happen, oh, okay, here's plan B. And that might include, I am starting to have the word and name retrieval difficulties. So I prepare a little bit more. So I have, before this meeting, I have my list. I have my list of names. I have my list of events. I have my list of things so that I know it's here. I just can't get it out here. Right. If that's my challenge. So for me, having pre-prepared and having a plan B, C, D, and being open-minded and laughing at myself tends to not, and I think, Judith, you brought up probably the best point. Is this really a problem or a barrier? Or are you just so set in your ways that you have to do it this way? You need to let go of that.
Yep. Yep.
So
thanks, Michelle. I really appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah, that's a really great perspective to share. I always like the analogy. I don't know where this comes from, but 1,000 ways to skin a cat.
Yes.
Poor cat. But
yes.
The idea being there's always more than one way to go about it, right? So
right.
Yeah, so sometimes we just need to think outside the box, so to speak.
Yep.
Joe, why don't you share with us how you approach things that come up, changes, problems, barriers, maybe that come up?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. Yeah, it's, you know, I've heard the first 5 years called by some as the honeymoon period, you know, first 5 years of Parkinson's. I don't know that that's true for everybody.
No.
It's, I don't believe it is, but there sometimes, depending on your age and, you know, there's Parkinson's that you have, there may be a grace period that doesn't feel like you have anything. And even when you have Parkinson's in a more advanced stage, sometimes you have days that feel like nothing has changed from before you had Parkinson's. Mm-hmm. And in a way, that's what's so insidious about it, is that even when you're suffering from it, there are days or portions of days that are a glimpse back at when there was no Parkinson's. I mean, it's nice to have those days, but you know it's short-lived. So I would say to you, enjoy those days. Enjoy every minute of those days that you can. You don't realize just how precious they are, you know, until something like this, you know, comes into your life. Yeah. I've definitely been dealing with some challenges lately as it relates to transportation. I wasn't a particularly good driver before I had Parkinson's. And go figure, I'm not a really particularly good driver now. In fact, I'm not a driver. I'm not really a driver anymore because I basically stopped driving. I will occasionally do the, the King Super Run, which is about 10 blocks. But
Yeah.
as far as getting on 6th Avenue in the morning, that's
No.
not ever again. My wife, fortunately, is an excellent driver, and we're trying to figure out our way, how we get around, how I get around, how we both get around. We have a son who's graduated from college. He's in a different part of the state right now, but we're learning how to do it. I just didn't want that to be my, I had a couple close calls that could have been bad, and they weren't. And I don't want that to be my legacy. So we had to make a decision literally in a day. I called my wife and I said, I'm done. So I've been dealing with that, and she's been dealing with it. We're getting through it. There are other modes of transportation. Uber loves me now. I'm like, it's way, more than you necessarily want to spend, but occasionally it's not that bad. Sometimes $5 or $6 here or there. And it's worth it for me. It all depends on what you want, what's important to you.
Right.
But I would say that's been an adjustment. And it's how you deal with the adjustment. I will say sometimes I roll with them. Sometimes, especially with the cognitive stuff, because cognitive is what's I think been the worst of my challenges so far, is that things I used to do in my sleep. I can't do simple tabulations sometimes. I mean, not to say I can't do them, not to say that my IQ has gone down, because I don't believe it has. I've taken a few tests. It's really just, it takes you longer to process. And, if you're dealing with sequences and it's just, it's like it's a shell game is the best way I can describe it. And it's easy to get confused. So you have to give yourself more time to get through security. You have to give yourself more time. You just have to allow for it. And, I'll tell you, I've flown a decent amount since things have loosened up. And I haven't had one person, I've been treated better going through TSA than I ever did before. I get a full body massage now when I go through, but I don't care. I don't care. They're doing their job, and they couldn't be nicer. In fact, it makes it way more interesting from their day to deal with me, because it's a little more, goes from yellow to orange for, a couple minutes. So the time passes. So people will, if somebody knows somebody, an uncle, my aunt, my whatever, with Parkinson's, they're part of the community. They're part of the community.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it's a really great example of adaptability, and it's day by day again, right? Up and down. So I'd love to pause for a minute and just ask the group if anyone has questions, or maybe there's a particular challenge that you're facing right now that you want to share and ask for some resources.
Come on now.
It's all good. No pressure, but please know that you have, just know that you have the opportunity. Okay. All right. Why don't we finish up with a dual question? Why don't we ask the panel to share maybe one of the most valuable tools or best advice that someone gave you around managing Parkinson's. You can share either, whatever strikes you. Judith, why don't you go first?
That's a hard one to go first on, or to go anyplace on. I actually have several items here, but I will condense them. The most valuable tool, at first I was going to say Ken, but Ken's not a tool. Ken is my spouse of 51 years. So yeah. But I find humor and acceptance absolutely critical to where I am at any given moment. So the way I employ those, in addition to my research push on any new idea, is I listen, I consider other people's opinions, I go to the internet or wherever the best written resources are, and I have to be willing to say, I don't know, and I need your help. Because that puts me in a position of hopefully being able to accept, even if I don't implement, but being able to accept the offer of assistance from someone else. And if you are mostly a type A person who has always been the leader in some sense, being led is a new way of living. And being open to that, I find is critical to success. Thanks, Meredith.
Of course. Thank you, Judith. Ken, do you want to add anything from the support partner's perspective?
Most valuable tool, exercise is right up there. Support groups is kind of next. And gratitude as an attitude, and extending and receiving grace from the community, plus the tool of being able to research information and finding it from reliable sources.
Mm-hmm.
There are really good podcasts and webinars and recorded webinars out there, like we're doing today, that address specific problems that we encounter in Parkinson's. And I really appreciate that as a tool. As far as the best advice anyone gave me, when life has challenged me, it's deal with the present and deal with the facts in the present.
Like that.
Can't live in the past, can't live in the future. We have to deal with what's in front of us now and do it with love, grace. Even though we get triggered in anger at times.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you. Michelle, why don't you go?
Sure. I took this just as a black and white, the most valuable tool, exercise, just as simple as that. And then you get into the more emotional, less solid things. And then I get into friends, my care partner, my husband, those kinds of things. Now, the best advice when life challenged me really aligns with a lot of what Ken and Judith were saying, is to give myself the grace to be challenged. Ask for help, let others help them. Then things get turned about. And us type A people, we're the ones that want to give the help. We want to give the joy, but we need to start helping out others experience the joy while they're helping us, which means we've got to, get better at learning how to help, ask for help when we have these challenges, and be okay. Have your buddy list ready. Keep an open mind and slow down and take time to enjoy the little miracles in your life.
I love that. That's good advice just in general, right? All of this is good advice in general.
True.
Yeah. Joe, do you want to share,
Yeah.
maybe
Thank you. Sure, I would love to, but I will tell you that Michelle and Judith and Ken really have put it really concisely. I'll just tag on and say that asking for help is, I always prided myself on doing everything, being self-sufficient and never having to rely on anyone for money or for a ride or for, you name it. And, maybe it's a guy thing, but I don't think so. It's probably, that's too easy.
I'm the same way.
Too easy to generalize that like that. But, my wife and I moved from our home in the Highlands to a condominium project in the Highlands because we were anticipating the future. Now, I may never need a cane, I may never need a walker or a wheelchair, but it's a good chance I may need something like that. But so we're in a place that's accessible, and that's important. But even more so than that, we thought, maybe it'll become an extension of our community. And we've only been here less than a year.
Point.
And met people that we never thought, normal, if life had gone on the way it was prior to Parkinson's, probably never had met these people. But I have to share with you the other day, there's a couple that we hit off with, and we went out to dinner with here in Denver on several occasions when, as soon as we could go out to dinner. But it was, we just had a lot of fun going out and talking. And they had to do some travel. And so last week they come up to me, Mark and Sue, and Mark came up to me because we were honest with them about what we're dealing with. And they could see there were some challenges. And they were about to leave, but they said, they'll be back in a couple months. They said, please, if there's anything, I don't care what time of day it is, let us know, because they're retired and they have the freedom to do these things. So, they please ask us for help. And I said, guys, I've learned you got to ask, you got to, and it wasn't easy for me to say that 5 years ago, but now I realize it's essential.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like if Greg were here, I think he would add, if we think about all the phases of our lives, like I think about when we had our son, like I was very used to doing everything myself, but now you're suddenly in a position where you really need to ask for help. And not something probably most of you guys can relate to. Maybe you started a new job, or you had a child, or maybe your parents were not doing well. All of these phases in our life, right? Where something really dramatic changes and we're new to navigating it. And the power in the community around us, if we just reach out and ask for help, which is the hardest part. I'm not good at it either. So maybe drawing on some of those past experiences in our life as well might be helpful as we move forward.
About when somebody comes to you and says, can you help me, please? And they're sincere about it. You could see it in their eyes. You want to help them. It's the same way, the other direction. So think about it that way as well.
I would also like to add a comment just to hear at the end. Ken mentioned attitude of gratitude. And I think I never gave that its due in the pre-PD years. I recognize that I had good things going in my life, all my life. I've been very fortunate, and I understand that. I acknowledge it. But now I have a peace with me that has to do with being grateful. And my life is so rich and so blessed. And it's enriched and blessed in ways that would not have happened did I not have Parkinson's. There's the people factor of Parkinson cannot be overrated.
And Meredith, I'd like to add on to that too quickly. What Judith was saying is, in no way do any of us, I'll speak on behalf of everyone, do we feel flip or, oh gosh, this is so easy. We're not, that is not our intention. We're coming with ready answers because we've been down the road of peace. This is hard. We don't want to leave the impression that, oh, snap, listen to us and everything will be golden. Right. There are days that are hard. There are days that are golden. And like Judith has said, there are days you will do better as you build your community and ask for help.
I think that the pandemic, if it's done anything, it's helped us understand that in a way we didn't beforehand.
Yeah, so helped us pivot.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well,
Meredith, thank you for the opportunity to participate in this today.
Definitely,
Yes,
For us also.
we appreciate.
yeah, I just wanted to conclude by asking if anyone had any last thoughts they wanted to share, or if anyone has any questions they want to ask of the group. Don't everybody speak at once.
Go
Go
ahead,
ahead,
I'm
Alejandro.
really thankful for everybody's knowledge and sharing what you guys do share. I don't necessarily have anybody in my family who knows they have Parkinson's, so it's not like it's on my first plate, but when I go and I just hear you guys talking, it's just education for me and always learning. And whenever there's a question somebody asks me off to the side, I'd be like, well, somebody just mentioned this in the last meeting, then maybe this helps you. So I too appreciate you guys sharing all that you have shared.
We're glad you're with us, Alejandro.
Yes. Alejandro.
Yeah, and Alejandro, one thing that's special about you is that, and I don't know if the rest of the panel is like this, I tend to also search for non-PD people and helpers and activities, okay? And, my life can't always be about PD.
Right.
And you're one that I trust, and exercise, I said, was my number one tool, and you're part of that. And your exercise program, although, you are not a Parkinson's, you don't have it, you don't have anyone in your family, you help my community and you help me
You're
as
part-
that non-Parkinson's person.
Absolutely.
So
I'm
I
glad
appreciate.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're very excited to have all of you here. So Joe, Judith, Ken, and Michelle are advisors with our Pathfinders program, which is our peer-to-peer connection. They're here just as a peer to answer questions, be a safe place to talk about things that are hard to talk about, share their experience like they did today, and share anything that's helped them. And Alejandro is here, and I'm here as well to provide you guys with any other resources or introductions into the community that you might need. Parkinson's Point has those resources available, like Parkinson's specific exercise and education. And this community, we're here to support you. So we hope you reach out. Let us know if you have any additional questions. If you didn't feel comfortable asking in front of the group, you can email us or call us, and we'd be happy to connect you with any of the advisors that are here today. We have a couple other advisors that aren't here today, like Greg and Steve. And I'm sure I'm forgetting someone, but yeah, we've got a team available to connect with you. So any other thoughts or questions before we sign off? All right. Well, thank you so much, guys, for being here to share your experiences. We really
Thank you
appreciate
for the
it.
forum.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this video will be up in a week or so that if others who couldn't make it want to check it out, it'll be available for them. And thank you, everyone, for your time and your expertise. It's a pleasure to be here with you. We'll see you
Likewise.
soon.
Have a good weekend. Be safe.
You got-
Take care, everybody.